Well, hello and welcome to everybody. This is seriously one of the most exciting moments of my 2020, and that is the absolute truth. It is my honor and it is my great privilege to even be sitting here as an alumni of the Faye Jones School of Architecture. I was actually a student when it became the Faye Jones School of Architecture. I enrolled in 2006 and I graduated in 2011. And I'm also a member of the landscape architecture program. So I was speaking earlier with my good colleague, Ernest, and I was telling him that I am one of the first Hispanic women to graduate from the landscape architecture portion of the school. So I'm very, very grateful. I am now currently on the Arkansas Alumni Board of Directors. So, I mean, it's just a gift that keeps on giving. I am so happy and proud to be here. And I am going to go ahead and pass it on to my good friend, Ernest, if you'd like to go ahead and take over.
All right. Thank you, Kathleen. My name is Ernest Duckery. I am a former student at U of A, actually graduated in 1995 before it was the Faye Jones School of Architecture. So I'm a little older. I had a chance to actually meet Ethel when she actually got to the school. So I have a personal relationship with her. I actually, once I started in the profession after graduating, I've also had a chance to meet one of the other speakers, which is Ngozi Brown. So she came to us right out of high school. So I might not look as old as I am, but I'm older than before they called it the Faye Jones School of Architecture. I actually work now at Winberg, Delona, and Davidson. I'm on the 18th floor of the Regents building in Little Rock. So that's the wonderful background that we have. I would pan so you can see the Capitol. I am still tied to the university by being on the board at the Black Alumni Society. I'm one of the board members there. So I am still trying to connect students and alumni. And at this point, I will turn it back over to Dean MacKeith.
Thanks very much, Ernest. Thanks very much, Kathleen. I'm very grateful for your time and your contribution, and certainly grateful for everything you gave to the school while you were students, and very respectful of the service you are now giving back to the university and to the school in your respective roles. It is gratifying always to be with alumni, but the work that you're doing is particularly important and particularly, of course, on point for us in our discussion today. So thank you again. On Monday, earlier this week, we started this four-part series focusing on current circumstances in the school and actually future prospects as well. And we began on Monday by focusing very specifically on the work that's occurring in the three departments that constitute the school: architecture, landscape architecture, and interior design. Today, we want to really present the school from another perspective, one that's even more foundational, I would argue, and that is the school's work and identity as it is found in community engagement and diversity, equity, and inclusion. Make sure that all is working here. Of course, for those who are telecommuting, so to speak, to the university from afar, I want to welcome you back to the campus. Here we look south across the campus, across the two towers, and off to the Boston Mountains with our own building, Paul Walker Hall, Stephen L. Anderson Design Center, just off to the right center. But in welcoming you back to the campus, I also want to welcome you to, I would say, an important and new and all too delayed perspective, which is to say, it is a moment for us to acknowledge that we are certainly not the first to occupy these heights and these forests in the state of Arkansas and in this region. And as part of our overall focus today in particular, and as we do now with all of our public events at the school, I want to begin with a land acknowledgement statement. The indigenous history of the land the University of Arkansas campus sits on goes back to time immemorial. And across that expanse of time, many successive groups have lived here and created sacred legacies in this area. The Fay Jones School of Architecture and Design acknowledges indigenous peoples were forced to leave their ancestral lands, including the Osage, Caddo, and Quapaw nations with ties to Northwest Arkansas. We further recognize that a portion of the Trail of Tears runs through our campus, and that the Cherokee, Choctaw, Muskogee or Creek, Chickasaw, and Seminole nations passed through what is now Arkansas during this forced removal. We acknowledge all indigenous teachers, researchers, and all other residents in our community and region today. We seek continuity and connection to the past as we look to the future with increased collaboration with indigenous governments and entities. We say to the citizens of indigenous nations, we see you and we thank you. Welcome you in that spirit also to the school as we look across the combined expanse of L. Anderson and Paul Walker. I welcome you now to the interior of our school, where in fact a very simple sign is present for all to see, welcoming all of who pass through the ground level of Paul Walker Hall to a school, a diverse community of future architects, landscape architects, interior designers, urban planners, and community leaders. We arrive here from many walks of life and experience, and we are joined together by our design identity and our belief that we can make a difference in others' lives through design and education. This is very much at the center of the school, the center of our lives, the center of our work together. It is so that we are working on many fronts to think about the identity of the school. One of them most recently, as you'll soon hear, has been through a virtual education effort. But that virtual education effort begins with this welcoming video. I believe it comes up now.
Welcome to the Fay Jones School of Architecture and Design.
Design is only limited by your imagination.
Design is innovation in material technologies. Design is working with your community.
There's no greater charge that can be posed on us than the opportunity to really make people happy.
Design is learning different perspectives.
Design is thinking about the environment.
Design improves people's quality of life.
Having the opportunity to creatively solve problems.
Welcome to the transformative world of design.
Welcome to a community of designers.
Welcome to having a voice through design.
Welcome to the Fay Jones School of Architecture and Design.
Welcome.
Need to try to bring this back out. Come on. Excuse me, folks, while we'll come back to this in a moment. The multiplicity of voices that are seen and heard in that video, in fact, reflects the multiplicity of voices in our school. And that is very much the central theme of our discussion today. Let me come back to this once again and share my screen one step further. The question, I'm sorry. The question that I want to make sure that I pose to everyone is the question that really is central now to all the work that we are doing. Oh, come on. Sorry. Didn't this happen last time? Yes. I'm going to perhaps proceed like this. It is important to note that we have posed these types of questions to ourselves for the last 6 years at least. They are questions of meaning and value. In other words, what does it mean to be the Fay Jones School of Architecture and Design in 2020? What must be and should be the work in this year and going forward? Now, in this case, we very much understand the work of the school to be found in society and to the betterment of that society, and to be found in the work that's now necessary to do through design towards issues of public health, issues of economic recovery, issues of racial and social justice, and certainly issues of climate change as we move forward. The work that we have is certainly consonant with the mission of the University of Arkansas, and we are very focused on building a better world, as the university is as well. We do so through a multidisciplinary, inclusive, place-responsive design education in service to Arkansas, the nation, and the world. Our vision resounds that, intending to design a more humane, resilient future for the state of Arkansas, the nation, and the world. Now, Ernest mentioned that he arrived at the school a little bit before the naming of the school in honor of Fay Jones. And while there are many aspects of the school which certainly predate that honorific being applied, there is a legacy and there is an attention that we give to the legacy being named as we are. What does it mean to be a school named in honor of one of the nation's greatest architects? Certainly an architect who worked with attention to the natural environment as well as the built environment, and who also worked across every scale of design, from furniture and interior architecture and design all the way through the larger landscape. For us, it means continuing that legacy of design excellence, and our faculty in many ways have continued that legacy with recent recognition given to Professor Blackwell, Professor Luoni, Professor Folan, Professor Smith, Professor Baker, to myself, and also to Professor Goodstein Murphy. It means continuing a legacy of design excellence in built form, and we certainly enjoy that in the facilities that we have at the school, both in Stephen L. Anderson Design Center and in Ball Walker Hall, in the facilities and premises of the University of Arkansas Community Design Center, and now also the University of Arkansas Resiliency Center in the Pryor Center on the downtown square. It means, of course, respecting the Fay Jones legacy that much more by being the stewards now of the Fay and Gus Jones house over in Evelyn Hills that we received as a gift some 5 years ago, and that we now bring forward increasingly as a house museum for public education and enjoyment. It means respecting still the legacy of Verna Garvin and the 210-acre woodland preserve known as Garvin Woodland Gardens. Here, of course, shown in this image, one of the newer aspects of the gardens, the treehouse, Evans Treehouse, designed by Modus Studio, which is now very much a magnetic center of attraction for the gardens, and increasingly indicates the educational role that the gardens has for the school and the university. And of course, it means on the horizon to come, a new facility for the school, the Anthony Timberland Center for Design and Materials Innovation. This design now fully underway as of this week by Grafton Architects, 2020 Pritzker Prize Award-winning architects of Dublin, Ireland, working together with Modus Studio and Nabholz Construction to bring this into being. We anticipate a groundbreaking for this building a year from now and a dedication in the fall of 2023. Our dedication to excellence also, of course, is about providing resources for our students and our faculty and our programs. And here too, I want to recognize the work of the Alumni Association and certainly the work of Mary Purvis and Ryan Peters and their work in the most recently concluded capital campaign, in which we achieved $68.5 million of funds raised for the school's future on a variety of levels: scholarships, capital projects, faculty support, and program support. We are a school also that is growing and has grown certainly dramatically over the last 6 years, really since we arrived into that new building. And if spring enrollment last spring was 585, fall enrollment is 730. We are reaching the limits of the spatial expansion we can have. And we are now in a period of what I would call wise growth or managed growth or growth towards greater depth and greater richness. And this is very much the subject as well of our conversation this afternoon. Growth comes with challenges, but growth also comes with opportunity. And it really is both the challenge and the opportunity that we have now as a school to grow to be a much more diverse, inclusive community altogether. This image, which you'll see a number of times throughout this presentation, is a selection of our most recent graduates. Young people who have benefited, we believe, from their education with us, but are truly now succeeding out in the world. And it is this kind of education, this excellence of education that we want to provide to ever greater depth and richness across the state, across the region, and across the nation. One last way of understanding the school and its work is really through this diagram. And this indicates that our school is rapidly approaching its 75th year of programs. And we'll begin to roll out what those celebrations will be in the coming spring. That it's a school certainly centered around the core disciplines of architecture, landscape architecture, and interior design, as we heard on Monday. It's a school with outreach now through the Garvin Woodland Gardens, the UACDC, the Resiliency Center, and again, soon the Anthony Timberland Center. And we'll hear about those outreach programs next Monday in the third of our 4 presentations. And it's also a school that is increasingly seeing its role in the environmental, economic, and cultural necessities of the state of Arkansas and really of the United States more generally through focus areas shown on the outer ring. And we'll talk about those issues and concerns next Thursday in the final of this series. But today I want to come to, again, issues of community engagement, diversity, equity, and inclusion, really as part of our strategic approaches as a school, and certainly as part of our necessary imperative identity. I've spent my first few minutes here talking about the ways in which we design for excellence. You'll now hear from a number of significant voices in the school of our emphasis on design for everyone, that is to say, in the cause of public service, in advocacy for design, and in inclusion in design across the state, and again, for the benefit of our students. I'll begin by asking Allison Turner, on faculty in architecture, but significantly also the Director of Community Education for the school, to talk about our efforts in outreach on behalf of young people across the state and region in a variety of formats and modes. Allison, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks, Peter, and welcome everyone. And yeah, for those of you who I have not had the privilege to meet yet, as Peter said, my name is Allison Turner. I'm a teaching assistant professor of architecture, and I've been with the school for about 12 years. And I've been the director of community education now since 2016. But prior to that, I had been doing some community outreach within the school since about 2009. I really started teaching our summer camps in 2009 and then took over as the director in 2014. So community education really encompasses all of our outreach programs that focus on specifically on K through 12 education, but we are also looking to expand beyond K through 12 as well. So I guess starting with Design Camp, which is our largest program, and I'll go ahead and talk about Design Camp pre-COVID, and then I wanted to talk about what we have been able to do in the last year, given the changes that have had to be made, just like everyone else in the world, having to make some shifts. So the image on the screen here shows some of the metrics from our 2019 camp, which is the last time we were able to meet in person. So the map on the screen here shows the draw from all of the different camps across the region. So yeah, the image here, so you can see from this image that there's a significant number of people coming from Northwest Arkansas, but we're also drawing students from across the state and even starting to get across the region. So in 2019, we had 250 students attend our camps. We had 7 different camps at 6 locations. So those locations included two camps in Fayetteville. We have a camp that we hold every year in Little Rock, in Hot Springs, in El Dorado, Wilson, and in 2019, we added a camp also in El Dorado, but also in Bentonville. So those are the 2 that you see on the screen that are highlighted. Those were our 2 new locations in 2019. So we were excited in 2020 to continue to expand the reach of our camp. And we had anticipated, we were planning for more than 250 students for 2020. We had also planned for a 2-week immersive camp for more advanced design students. What we had encountered was students were wanting more. They were coming back to our camp every year. We had some students who had come to our camp 4 times. So we wanted to offer a new opportunity for those students. So we had a 2-week immersive camp. This was the first time we were taking applications, and before we closed registration in March, we had 13 applications for that camp. So that was pretty exciting. Also in 2019, I just want to go back, we had 20 students who came to our camp from the Delta through the Alex Foundation. And we are starting to see a number of design camp alumni entering into the Fay Jones School. We started seeing our numbers of these students increasing around 2017. Our largest class of design camp alumni entered the school in 2018 with 19 students, and we've continued to have design camp alumni in the school, and now we're starting to see them all the way through the year levels, which is really exciting. Okay, Peter, if you would like to go to the next slide, please. So design camp is the largest kind of component of the community outreach, but there is outreach that happens all year round. And this is just a kind of a selection of images from some of the different events that happen during
Allison, I think we lost you. Allison?
Sorry, I must have a bad connection.
All right, now we hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. It's telling me my internet connection is unstable. So let me know if I cut out again. Anyway, so we've developed our planes. And the reason that those came about in the first place was as I was starting to go out into the community and work with students in different workshops and other capacities, I found that I really needed a tool to be able to have students build and create something quickly without using scissors or glue or anything like that. So I take those with me to lots of different places, including the East Conference, which happens in Hot Springs every year and brings about 2,500 East students from across the region. I go to the Delta frequently, and other faculty as well have gone to the Delta through the Alex Foundation to work directly with the students for several days doing design workshops. We host many classes and groups of students who come and visit the Fay Jones School, and those are always fun because we get to do workshops where we have the students build or draw or create different things. Okay, and then Peter, if you want to go to the next slide. So in 2020, when we had to do the shift to online or to think about how to, I guess it gave us the opportunity to rethink the way that we structure our camp for this new format. And when we did close registration in March, we had a number of students already enrolled for the summer, and we pulled those students who at that point had already had a couple of weeks of Zoom class. And the consensus was they didn't want to do more Zoom education. They wanted something different. So we decided to create a series of 25 videos. And Peter, if you'd like to go to the next slide. And this is just a screenshot from each of the 25 videos. The idea with the videos was for us to try to capture all of the content that we bring to the students at Design Camp through this video series. So we had videos that introduced the school, we had videos that introduced the professions, we highlighted the students at the school. They were a huge part of the process of making the videos and filming the videos. We highlighted design and designers throughout Arkansas. And we did a bunch of different workshops on sketching and model making and brainstorming and all kinds of stuff like that. So those videos, one of the things we wanted to do was make those accessible to everyone. So they are currently available on the school's YouTube site. And the videos were also created with support from the Alice Walton Foundation. So if you go to the next slide, Peter, now we're trying to figure out what's the next step for the videos. So we're currently in the process of working with Arkansas PBS to create a series of, essentially we're creating an online design camp that has embedded clips from the videos and lesson plans. And Peter, if you go to the last slide of mine, you can start to see, we're breaking it down into, it's essentially 5 days, which again follows the camp curriculum, and then taking the videos and making them more interactive. This particular image shows one of the videos where you can pause and then there's hotspots that you can click on different components and it will give you more information or definitions. And then the students, as they're progressing through these lessons, there's a bunch of interactive kind of tools that will allow the students to interact with each other through this platform. So we're hoping for this to roll out in the next month or so. And this will be an option for Design Camp moving forward, no matter what happens in 2021, but it will give us an opportunity to have multiple platforms to reach students.
Thanks very much, Allison. This is an extremely important type of outreach for us, as we are the only school of professional design education in the state in its research university. And Allison has truly been the leader in bringing this forward. And the entire shift to a virtual format over the summer has actually turned Allison from an instructor in architecture into a film producer and director. It's a tremendous accomplishment, and there's much for us now to continue to build on. So thank you very much, Allison, for that. This feeds very much into our second focus for the day, which is to focus more generally, but also with a degree of specificity on initiatives towards greater diversity, equity, and inclusion in the school. This has been very much a part of the work undertaken by the school since before I arrived, but it is now much more of a complete effort across faculty, across staff, across administration, and very much across our students as well. To give us an overview of these efforts, I'll ask first Ethel Goodstein-Murphy, Associate Dean, and then in succession, we'll hear from the leaders of our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Working Group. Then we'll hear from John Folan with regard to efforts in Freedom by Design and the University of Arkansas's Multicultural Center. And then we'll hear from Ngozi Brown in regards to the student chapter of the Noma organization nationwide. So first, Ethel, if you will.
Thank you, Peter. It comes, I suspect, as a surprise to no one that I'm compelled to begin with a window to the past, to think about history as we begin to set the table for our initiatives, our desires, our goals in achieving a more equitable, accessible, and inclusive design community. I don't know where my slide went, but when my slide comes back, we will see the specter of women suffragettes in front of the White House, the 50s housewives consigned to the kitchen, Dr. King speaking out in Washington, D.C., our own Central High School, Stonewall. All reminders that this has been a long, hard trip. To see the best of all people brought to voice, to bear, and to be part of the making, shaping, and stewardship of the made environment. I also picked these slides because they're reminders that our history of who we are, what our identities are, and how we voice our concerns are mapped, are highlighted, are orchestrated in the made and the natural worlds. I also reflect with this introduction that desires for an equitable design community that brings to the table as designers individuals from many and varied backgrounds, of many and varied cultures and ethnicities, of races and classes, has been hard to come by, but it's a fight that we have been making for a very long time. I would do disservice to the school if I didn't recognize our former Dean Jeff Shannard's efforts to produce a diversity plan in the first decade of the 2000s, a plan that got a little bit of national attention. I'd be not fulfilling the role of history if I didn't point out that in the past 5 years, there have been a plethora of guidelines and best practices and statements from the AIA, from the College Art Association. Obviously, I grabbed stuff that was on my desktop, but things changed. Can I have the next slide, please? Things changed dramatically this summer, when in spite of the fact that we have had civil rights legislation in this country since 1964, the inequities, the misunderstandings, the lack of respect that is played out in our public spaces and places became vivid to us in the unfortunate events that ended George Floyd's life, together with other incidents that indicated that we have not come nearly as far as we would have liked to have come as a society. Those events took many of us aback. Those events made many of us feel, what the hell have we been doing for the last 50 years and making the good arguments and fighting the right fights? But they did cause us to focus and refocus and make clear that designers have a role in creating spaces and places that promote equity and inclusion, and that will not happen if the individuals who are designers are not equally as diverse as the communities that we serve. Many of you will have seen the statement that Fay Jones School leadership put forth on June 10th. And it was a statement that had to be made to recognize the horrors that we were seeing in the news, to recognize the pain that we read on the Black at U.Arch Twitter site, and to take some responsibility. That no one who has been in practice of architecture, as have I, for damn near 50 years, can say that in some way, shape, or form, they are not responsible. And as a school, we have an obligation to take responsibility, to move ahead, and to make clear that diversity is part of our DNA. Could I have the next slide, please? How do we do that? How do we move forward? How do we make vivid and actionable our overarching goal to change the culture and change the narratives connected to it through design, through what we know, through what we're trained and skilled in doing. Raising voices and making clear that there is a position that supports change, as well as recognizing what has gone wrong in the past, is part of the culture of the university, part of the culture of the design community. It is to the greater good, certainly, that with the articulation of strategic planning for the university, our chancellor, Dr. Steinmetz, even before the events of this summer, had put diversity and inclusion on the center of the university's radar screen, with the appointment of a wonderful new vice chancellor for diversity, equity, and inclusion, Yvette Murphy-Irby, leading that charge and organizing a wide community of folks on campus, faculty, staff, administration, students, ever so importantly at all levels in all schools, to form the ideas and the practices that can make that vision real. It's going to take time, but we're part of that. I know Peter and I are somewhere in that photograph in our DEI shirts, but I dare you to find us. More importantly, and more recently, how does that trickle into the design professions? How does that trickle into the Fay Jones schools? This summer, together with our colleagues in peer design programs and schools across the SEC, Peter took a leadership role in putting forth a proposition, a commitment to designing a better world, one of authentic diversity, equity, and inclusion, giving voice to the particular provocative and proactive roles that designers can play, and making clear that the mission of design schools in the SAC is to address these issues. Can I have the next slide, please? There are a lot of good reasons at the level of society, culture, and identity for our passion for affecting change in our programs, in the way that we operate, in the resources that we can provide. But I have to recap the photograph of our students that Peter showed earlier, because there's a very easy answer to me of why I want to have these discussions again, why I want to unpack the steps, the factors that have called us to the table for change. It's a two-word answer: my students. Peter and my assistant, Carol Rouser, gave me a word, gave me a phrase that I love to use. When we were talking about some of the wonderful young men and women that come through my office, she gave me the phrase spirit children. She said, those are your spirit children, and these are my spirit children. Selwyn Backus, a graduate of spring 19, and currently an MArch candidate at the Harvard Graduate School of Design, and a young man who in the year between undergraduate and graduate education brought his expertise and his ideas and discovery back to the high school in Omaha that awakened him. Jensen Johnson, who is a graduate of last spring, currently in Little Rock, doing a variety of small projects while she makes her applications to graduate school on a path towards working for the public good through design that she hadn't envisioned before last summer. I could go on and on. Christopher Galindo, who is stayed in Arkansas working in Fort Smith, giving back to his community through his design skills. And I could go on, and I can't leave out Ernest Banks, and I can't leave out Tatu Getire, who returned to her native Kenya and has started an education program for girls to build, an organization called Build Her. If there is no other incentive to change, to re-examine what we do in a school, it is these wonderful human beings, the young men and women, and Ernest, I'll pick on you for a moment, the not so young anymore, men and women who are part of the Faye Jones community, past, present, and future, who deserve an environment where they are welcomed, where they are supported, and where they can truly expand the discourse on design. Next slide, please. In looking at how we could address a revitalized and intensified mission in diversity and equity and inclusion, we looked at a number of areas of endeavor. And the last thing I want to do is read a laundry list as if I were reading you from the phone book. But there are many areas of action and actionable ways of being in the world that are on our radar screen. I won't read everything to you. I'll highlight a couple of things. But we've been concerned about public actions, publications, and statements. We've been concerned about community engagement. We've sought change in our faculty and staff appointments. We've looked and will continue to look at our curriculum, and perhaps most importantly, we have got to find better ways to diversify our student population, support those young men and women of underrepresented populations, so that we not only get them in the door, we keep them in the door, we keep them engaged, we speak to their needs and interests, and we effect graduation. Just a couple of highlights on this long list that we're happy to make available to you. We focused our lecture series this fall on matters of equity and inclusion, and we welcomed Michelle Wilkinson, one of the curators of the National Museum of African American History. We've welcomed our good colleague, Leslie Loco, a native of Ghana, dual citizenship in Scotland, who has worked globally in the cause of understanding how environment shapes identity and place. We welcomed Mira Henry, a young emerging designer from Los Angeles, who has unpacked her own autobiography in design and space making. And we will continue to promote programs that look at how race, identity, and design are interrelated and actioned. You've heard a little bit about the design camp. We have focused our annual Garvin Symposium in landscape architecture on looking at the heritage of the East Cemetery, the African American burial ground in Fayetteville. And we have students participating in an array of multicultural activities. Stay tuned with regard to programming. We will continue in the spring, and we're particularly looking forward to exhibitions that we will make available remotely as well as face-to-face that will highlight territories of borderlands. And we're particularly excited about Pascal Sablon's Say It Loud exhibition and program. Students, as I said, are what we're all about. We are looking very carefully at how we recruit for the school. We are looking with understanding of perceptions of the university and perceptions of the professions, of expanding recruiting across the state, with rebuilding relationships with local community, places like Springdale, where we have an architecture and engineering academy, and really making sure that our colleagues in the Delta, in West Memphis and Marion understand that we see the Faye Jones School of Architecture as the state's school of architecture, not Northwest Arkansas's School of Architecture. Those dialogues are continuing and evolving. We have benefited from scholarship support from any number of donors. And if I can have the next slide, please. As we celebrate our 75th anniversary, we will celebrate a legacy that complements the legacy of Faye Jones. What we do, what we show, what the campus community sees as important, and how better can we make a statement than by honoring our first African-American graduate, the late and much missed Wally Carradine, by naming the front portal, front center on access to the Faye Jones School in his honor. Clearly, there is a great deal of work to be done, but if I may segue into the next presenter, perhaps the best thing that we have done coming out of intensive conversations with faculty, staff, and students through the summer is to appoint Associate Professor of Landscape Architecture, Gabriel Diaz de Montemayor, into a new position as the school's DEI Coordinator and Dean's Fellow for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And it is with great anticipation, pride, and excitement about what Gabriel will bring to us, complemented by the work of Michelle Pribbernow, our career services specialist, and I'm happy to turn the podium to them.
Thank you, Ethel. Thank you very much. To start with this quick presentation of what we have been working on, Michelle Pribbernow and I, and the work group focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, which includes staff, faculty, and we are also looking into expanding with students and alumni. We always think it's important to provide a little bit of context with regards to the lack of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the design professions, and of course, the educational institutions that get new professionals into the pipeline. All three professions within the school have this situation of a lack of diversity. We are just presenting here with some statistical information from the American Institute of Architects, of whose 94,000 members, only 2,270 are African American, and of those, only 452 are women. For now, at least, the future doesn't seem to be looking much brighter. According to this article, only 5% of students enrolled in architecture programs are African American, according to demographic data compiled by the National Council of Architectural Registration Boards. Similar situation happens in the profession of landscape architecture. For example, about 18% of the US population identifies as Hispanic or Latino, while only 10% of landscape architects and only 4% of ASLA members identify as Latinx. About 14% of the population identifies as African American, but only 3% of landscape architects and just over 1% of ASLA members do. And with regards to the interior design profession, only 69% of the 87,000 practitioners in the industry are women. Sorry, 69% of those practitioners are women, yet female leadership at design firms is only 25%. Additionally, only 36% of newly licensed architects are women, and only 2% are Black. Next slide, please. Michelle, I'll give it to you now.
Thank you, Gabriel. So as Ethel mentioned before, over the summer, we convened a working group of faculty and staff and the school's leadership and did some work to look at where the school is, where we'd like to be, and starting to create some actions to get us there. I just wanted to share with you what the group concluded after a lot of really productive and fantastic meetings, a lot of great ideas going together. And we basically came up with 2 goals to focus on for the future. One is for the Faye Jones community to be comprised of at least 30% diverse individuals in 30 months. And this is kind of a broad one looking at including Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Asian, and international students and faculty, which of course requires a school-wide commitment to recruiting, retaining, and supporting individuals and creating a complete culture of access, equity, and inclusion. And then another goal of realizing a student population of 15.4% Black students by the year 2030. This number is specifically chosen because that matches the state's population, state's demographic. Since we are the state school and we serve the population of Arkansas, we want to also reflect that population. So those are our goals. We included here a little bit of demographic information so you can see sort of where we've been at recently, hovering around 3% Black or African American students for the last few years. So it's not been a lot of growth in an upward direction recently. So that is really our main area of focus with a lot of these initiatives. So next slide, please. Okay. So we came up with 3 parts recommendations for kind of the immediate action. Basically the semester that's coming to a conclusion, the next school year, and then more long-term recommendations going into the future, with the idea, of course, that all of these are flexible. These are going to be changing based on the results. Are things working? Are they not? What do we need to change? And most importantly, based on what our students, our alumni, our constituents, what they say they need, because that is, of course, the most important thing. And unfortunately, it looks like a little photo, an image we embedded here didn't quite make it through. But one of the things we did do this past semester, just 2 weeks ago, was oh yeah, there it is. Great, thank you. Designing While Black, we had this wonderful panel conversation with alumni and with Ngozi faculty, talking about their experiences, responding to questions from alumni and students had a terrific response to this event. It was incredibly productive. So that's something that has just happened recently. If we could go back. Thank you. One more, please. Oh, that is another good one though. So the hesitation on the other slide, we did have all of our recruitment brochure translated into Spanish, and we are exploring also having that translated into Marshallese. Northwest Arkansas has the largest population of Marshallese individuals in the world, actually. So we are looking to expand our connection to those groups. Some of our other initiatives and recommendations have been discussed a little bit, so I'll just kind of quickly go through this. We're also looking at increased and multilingual building signage, just to make it easier perhaps for first generation students, for parents especially, who may be a little intimidated by the academic setting, to join our Faye Jones family. We created the working group created a curriculum discussion guide for departmental use. We've increased the focus on improving faculty diversity in the current searches that are underway. As you've already heard, the land acknowledgement statement is now part of our school's order of operations. We have proposed an expansion of the DEI committee and subcommittees so we can get more voices to the table, faculty, students, staff, and alumni. The working group developed an anonymous survey for students and alumni to provide feedback on their experiences in the school, any unmet needs, and their suggestions for change. Similarly, we have proposed forums to talk to all these groups and gather information from. We are currently exploring, even later today actually, exploring avenues of cost reduction for students. As anyone familiar with the education process knows, this is a very expensive discipline. So we want to look to mitigate those costs in every possible way we can. We've proposed additional awards for faculty, alumni, and staff to recognize DEI contributions. And we've created a recommendation for more mentorship programs to connect students with each other and to connect students with practicing alumni. All right, back to you, Gabriel.
Thank you, Michelle. We just very quickly, just to let you know what we're working on right now. We are working with the planning of a workshop and lecture and workshop or workshops. In this case, we are in a current conversation with Y Think Tank, who is composed of Cruz Garcia and Natalie Frankowski, who are here in this picture, who are the authors of a very widely distributed and globally acclaimed publication, a manual of anti-racist architecture education. We hope to finish up the planning to make it happen early, hopefully in the spring 2021 semester. And then secondly, we are also working to relaunch a renewed Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee of the school, including faculty, staff, students, and alumni. So hopefully some of you here in the audience can join in and help us out so that we can work together to achieve the objectives of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the school. And I'll stop now. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Gabrielle. I will pass quickly now to John Folan, professor and department head in architecture, for some specific focus on the work that he's doing with students, Freedom by Design, and with the coming University of Arkansas Multicultural Center. John?
Thank you, Peter. It's a pleasure to see everybody again today. If I could have the next slide.
Yes.
I think in order for us to have the degree of success that we're all aspiring to have, it's going to be important for us. If I use one metric that was provided just recently in the work that Michelle and Gabrielle presented, the 15.4% demographic statistic for Black population in the state of Arkansas is a benchmark. Based on statistics that were presented Monday, we can see that we're far from being at that point. We will need to triple the number of students that we have representing that demographic sector, not to mention other demographic sectors within the school. And so departmentally and at the school, we've been focused on identifying mechanisms and ways that we might be able to do that. And of course, everybody's aware that we all need to be able to see ourselves in a path to the future, and we all need to see ourselves in a path to opportunity. So we have been fortunate to bring Bill Bates, who is the National AIA president from 2018 to 2020, onto the Department of Architecture Professional Advisory Board as a member. He's also going to serve as a professional mentor and diversity thought partner. Bill's background is quite impressive, and for the sake of time in this meeting, I'm not going to extend through the list of his accomplishments, but I came to know Bill through several years of working with him in Pittsburgh. He has a diverse range of professional experiences that span from architectural design through development, multi-billion-dollar development. And he's able to speak multiple languages. We talk about multiple languages, it's not just the linguistics, it's understanding different cultures and different cultural backgrounds. And he comes with a wealth of experience that is incredibly important in the context of the aspirations that we have. So he'll be joining us on a national stage. We're really fortunate to have Reginald Wright also joining the Professional Advisory Board this year. I think most of you are familiar with Reggie. Reggie actually has a fairly similar background in terms of Bill's. He's spanned almost every dimension of what an architectural education and architectural practice have to offer. Also incredibly empathetic, and there's a difference between having empathy and understanding. I think both Reggie and Bill have an ability to understand the challenges that students may be facing as they enter into an academic environment that's as demanding as a school of design as we have. Reggie, in addition to his role on the professional advisory board, has been named the Fay Jones School of Architecture and Design Diversity Recruitment, Retention, and Graduation Consultant. That really is significant. The nomenclature in that title is significant because it does talk about the need of not just getting somebody in the door, but making sure that individuals who are brought in are part of the family and that that family is cultivating people to success. Next slide. One of the assets that we have here certainly is Design Camp. And I think as we all are well aware, and as we have discussions about how the meter is moved, it means that we need to start reaching out to people at earlier and earlier ages so that these opportunities are seen as viable paths forward. This year we started a chapter here called Freedom by Design. It's an affiliate of the AIAS program. These are the guiding principles that the students have developed as part of their work in this initial year. I've started working with a group of 23 students this year on the development of a pilot project and the development of an organizational structure that will sustain efforts in working with communities and focusing on needs of communities. This is an extracurricular avenue for our students to be utilizing and having an impact on the community and in working with community partners. Next slide. It is in partnership with the National Council of Architectural Registration Boards, and the focus and the aspirations of the organizations are very high. It's to radically impact the lives of people in their community through modest design and construction solutions. I use this slide as an illustration. I will show you some of the work that the students have been engaged in, which is extraordinary in terms of its scope and what it promises and the partners that they put together in the initial year. But I'm using this slide because this notion of something that's modest is reflective of Freedom by Design chapters that I've been affiliated with 2 other universities where I started them. At Carnegie Mellon University, where I arrived from in the summer of 2019, we did a weatherization program for residents in underrepresented communities. To date, we are over 1,300 families that have been served in their homes. And this project was recently awarded the very first NAACP SEED Award for social, environmental, economic, and equity design. So I think that the work that the students are engaged in here stands to support the efforts and the good efforts that have been sustained here for so long in propelling us forward. Next slide. We've obviously all been working in the context of the pandemic, working remotely. So that means that some of the work that the students might have engaged in had they been able to meet with people in person, individually, and working physically, might have taken a different form. I think the students were very innovative. Discussions about what types of projects to take on and who to partner with resulted in the development of a coloring and activity book that aims to present ideas about racial justice through the lens of design. So students worked remotely. They started full efforts on this last February, working with idea generation. And then by March, when they were fully remote, had to move and work through the channels that we've all been utilizing since then. Next slide. And the result to date is a 74-page workbook that is to be utilized by middle school faculty and middle school students, ages 11-14. The activity book, again, is to educate the audience about social inequity, especially racial inequity, and the ways to advocate for work and toward justice. The book aims to empower its audience by providing them with chances to envision themselves as future designers, no matter their race or their social status. So the students are working through Thaden School, which is a differential tuition school based in Bentonville. We've been working with their faculty and leadership there. They are also working with the Department School of Education here on campus, and as an outreach of other work as an extension of other work that we've been doing with the Multicultural Center, which I'll discuss in a moment. They are working with the Vice Chancellor of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and a number of other allied entities in that effort. But what this book does, it's in a trial period now with a focus group, and each one of the activities that are included in the book are intended to seed different volumes and different educational components. But there are things that are intended to bring design to those who may not be seeing that as an opportunity moving forward. Next slide. This year, we've also been working with the Ideals Institute on the conception of a multicultural center. We had a group of 3 students that worked, Justice Barnes, Jayla Jones, and Terry Ballard, who represent different backgrounds. One is an international student, 2 others, one representing experiences in the state and the Delta, and the other in the central portion of the state. And of course, all have found their way to Northwest Arkansas. They worked with the Multicultural Center in helping them understand what students would like to see on a campus with regard to multicultural centers, what would help enhance their experiences, and enhance their experiences in terms of promotion of their success and their path to graduation. They took a look at over 140 different multicultural center typologies globally. They categorized those, they cataloged them and diagrammed them for the Ideals Institute, working with Yvette Murphy-Irby, who Dr. Goodstein had mentioned in her presentation. And of course, this summer, if we go to the next slide, the students in their work really took to categorizing and analyzing information that was being posted through social media, particularly with the Black Student Caucus and response to that, as well as other multicultural outlets. And they were able to very clearly articulate things that were consistent themes that were being brought up that might be translated into physical reality. And as a result of this research, next slide, they made recommendations regarding types of spaces that need to foster a positive environment for students on the campus, those that can be affiliated with specific units on campus, but those that are also talking about a global community and the global campus community. As a result of this work, and I'm showing you a very abbreviated, in all of this work that the students have invested heavily in, I'm showing you very abbreviated versions of this, as are my colleagues. The next slide. This work culminated in the diagram development and programming of different forms of multicultural center that might be implemented at the University of Arkansas, both as new construction, inhabiting existing buildings, and as adaptive reuse of targeted buildings. So the students are having a significant impact in terms of changing the trajectory of the future. They are representing good conscience, and I think are demonstrating that they're emerging as strong citizens of a diverse and inclusive community. Since I know that we're running over on time, I guess, Peter, I'm sure you'll want to give an introduction, but I'm pleased to be handing this to Ngozi Brown, who, based on the conversation at the beginning of the meeting, I think everybody is familiar with. So fortunate to have Ngozi join us on the architecture faculty this fall, continuing into the spring. And she'll be talking a bit about what our plans are with NOMAS.
Thank you so much, John. Yes, I have recently joined the faculty and have been fortunate enough to be asked to work with the NOMAS chapter at UArk, which already is in existence and has already done some cool things, and I'm still familiarizing myself with some of the previous work. So a lot of what I'll be talking about right now will be just ideas, possibilities, projections that we're making on how we will continue to engage students and contribute to design from the unique perspective of minority students. So NOMAS is the National Organization of Minority Architecture Students. It's the student organization of Noma. I think it's been mentioned before in this talk. And my previous experience with like the AIA Diversity Committee and with Women in Architecture, I think is going to help me as I work with the NOMAS chapter at UArk. Also, I'm actually currently in talks with a fellow colleague, Candy Adams, at the university on starting an actual NOMA chapter, the professional organization. And if so, then we look forward to collabing with NOMAS as well. Next slide, please. So as far as ideas, so we're still brainstorming, we're still working together to come up with ideas to engage our students. One of them that we have discussed and looked into a little bit is something called a student engagement fund. And what this would be and how we would fund this is still something we're having conversations about, but it would encourage students to participate, be very active in leadership and participation via the reimbursement of some of the fees, well, actually all of the fees associated with NOMA's membership. So right now the national dues are $45 for students, and then if we're at large student, which is the local chapter dues, then it would be another $60. So we're looking at basically for taking roll call at all of our NOMA's meetings and reimbursing students that have an 85+ % participation in NOMA's. This is important for building a network and for building a rapport and community. So that's our first step at trying to make sure that we first capture the audience and get the audience engaged. Next slide, please. Then in order to have a focus for our group so that we're not just meeting for no reason, but we are meeting to share a common goal, we are looking at the NOMA's design competition, which is an annual competition. What's really exciting about this competition is it is in honor of Barbara G. Laurie, who was a professor at Howard University and HBCU, and was just a very active NOMA member, and who passed away in December 2013. So it'll just be a nice introduction to another designer of color and to honor her legacy by participating in this program, in this design competition. So what we would be doing is the NOMA students, and again, this is all up, we're still working through the details, but we would be meeting to focus on the competition and submitting work, which will be due on October 9th of next year. The project that we'll be working on is actually a project that potentially will be built because it is the Noma Legacy headquarters, and it will be built in Detroit. So the students could be working on a real project, but either way, that opportunity for a design competition and us coming together. So the way we would assemble our teams is the minority students will be working together, where our teams would be staggered for years. So basically your teams would have a first year student, second year, third, fourth, and fifth working together. That creates, there's so many opportunities there. First, there's an opportunity to start off at the university as a mentee and move into the role of being a mentor. It networks all of the students of color together quickly, so that if you are the only student of color in your studio, that doesn't mean that you don't see other brown and black and faces of color. Like, you will still be working with, in this particular, the Noma's group, you'd be working with other designers that look like you or that have a similar background. And then I think that really will help with retention. It will support some of the Black Caucus ideas. We've talked about possibly having a space, a safe space, or a space to work where we could collab on this design. So it's just something we're thinking about, and it will help us to stay focused as we meet and make our meetings have intention. So next slide, please. And so in this design competition, another thing that will happen, hopefully, is we'll take those SEF funds. Let's say we win the competitions, we would be able to take the prize money, which you see there, and the students can use that for the work that they're doing at school. We know that one of the big issues that students of color have communicated is the disparity financially and the challenges. I remember Reggie speaking on that actually at the Design and While Black talk, and how the cost of the entry into and the cost of maintenance in an architecture program can be challenging. And so SEF funds could be used to supplement that, and also to reward students in the design competition. And then that would lead us to our consideration of going to Detroit as a group in October. So even whether we win or lose the design competition, which I'm sure we will win because we take it very seriously and be very committed to it. But we would go to the Noma conference. This is a great way to network again, which again has to do with retention. It has to do with a feeling of a sense of place and a sense of belonging. So taking the students to Detroit, where they're this year, because the thing that's happening this year in Detroit is this is the 50-year anniversary of the founding of Noma, and it's happening where Noma was founded, which is in Detroit, by the 12 African-American architects that founded it. So going there, it will be amazing because we'll be coming out of COVID, we'll be finally traveling together, we'll be going to a very important site where we're going to be designing for that site, and it will be the 50th year. So I think this will just really encourage and energize our Noma students. And again, hopefully what we'll be able to do with those SEF funds are send our leaders, our Noma leaders, will hopefully subsidize their travel and their expenses to this conference 100%. And then with other members of Noma that are very active, that have an 85% plus involvement in Noma, then we will hopefully subsidize their conference experience for 50%. And then the last thing, next slide, please. What we like to do is celebrate our students. Noma does have a magazine. I have reached out to Noma. I reached out to them about the design competition, and I've also spoken with them about their publication, which is done every quarter. And the idea is perhaps doing like student profiles. Maybe our Noma students could type up and do the PR on that. That's another opportunity to, as design professionals, to do advocacy. And perhaps we could also, since it's every quarter, maybe we could make sure that 2 of those quarters that UARC students are actually being profiled. So it's a great way to elevate our program and highlight and showcase our students, while also giving them experience with the larger professional organization and experience with the PR and the advocacy side of our profession. And so these are just some ideas, next slide, that we're doing that we're working through. and that we're hoping will retain and potentially, you know, as we win design awards, if this becomes an annual thing, the design competition, we win these awards and we use that as a recruiting opportunity for students of color. So it's just a great way to kind of focus us with NOMAs, keep us from just meeting and becoming a social club, and hopefully also supporting the greater purpose of the university and hitting those numbers, those goals for minority participation that Gabriel and Michelle and Dean MacKeith and Dr. Goodstein, everyone have been working on. And that's all for me.
Thank you very much, Ngozi, and really thank you to all who've been presenting, and really to all who are still with us. As you can see, there is work that we need to be doing. There is work that we are doing, and work that we are very committed to. And your engagement with the work that we're doing is essential. And any of us are available to you for questions, for thought contributions, ways in which we can be more effective in our outreach and more effective in following through on the commitments we've made. Our work, as I've said, is really for the betterment of society and culture, beginning here in Arkansas, but extending throughout the region, the country, and the world. And again, it is through this somewhat diagrammatic format that we propose to do this. But again, to restate, we are certainly a school in which design for excellence is emphasized, design for everyone is emphasized, and design for environmental and economic resiliency is emphasized. You've heard a bit about our focus on excellence, our design for everyone emphasis. Next week, we'll turn to our third topic, our third issues here of the ways in which we reach out towards environmental and economic resiliency. And I'll look forward to those two discussions with all of you listening in. Please bring a friend. Monday, December 7th, we'll focus on our centers of excellence. Thursday, December 10th, we'll focus on what we'll call design futures. I want to make sure if there are comments or questions that we're able to address them. We do have, I think, a chat box that's open. If there are people who have comments or questions, we certainly can be on for another 10 minutes or so. Let me, or even maybe less, but nonetheless, I will open the floor at this point.
This is Charles.
Hello, Charles.
Very impressive. All of your reports were in depth with examples, and your measurables are showing you're having some effect in the camps, the work with the 14-year-olds. I think, as you pointed out, it's going to pay dividends and make a difference in people's lives and in our state and our nation, I expect.
And bring richer results.
Thank you, Charles, and thanks, Anne. It's great that you are able to join us from your perspectives now being, having traveled well outside of Arkansas, but still coming back to us. There is no more, I think, greater need for us as a school at this point than to truly reflect the society for whom we will be designing, for whom our students will be designing. And there are challenges in doing so. I want to note that right now, the school has posted announcements for new faculty in architecture and new faculty in interior design. Those are open searches, and very much we are seeking the widest range of applicants that we can in order to, yes, bring people who can be role models for all of our students, who can be magnetic in their presence in the school. So I'll ask all of you who are listening in as alumni, if there are those candidates that you could direct to us or could recommend to us, that would be extremely important. That counsel would be valued. Those announcements are out. If you need paper copies or PDF versions, please let us know and we'll make sure you get them. But that is the step forward. It's not only student recruitment, it's also faculty recruitment. So at least I want to make that point very clear. Other comments? I know we're close on to 1:30, and it is we always have maybe too much to say, or in some cases not enough. But I appreciate everyone staying on for the additional half hour to give you all a sense of just the extent of work that we're undertaking here. Ernest or Kathleen, you introduced our afternoon. Any comments or observations from your perspective as our host, I suppose?
I love the trajectory that the entire school is taking, and I absolutely love that Professor Goodstein gave us a history lesson, as I always enjoy listening to. But that's very, very satisfying for me, knowing that we're on this alumni, so we're on a student increase, which is very good, and that we're on a diversity journey. So thank you so much for that. That's very good to know. And in any way that I can help, I am absolutely here.
And that's the same for me. I really enjoyed everything. It enlightened me to some things. It also, I think one of the things that Allison has spoke about was the Alex Foundation. And that was one thing that I was involved in early on. So to actually see that still going on, along with the development that the university and the direction that it's going, it's pleasing and it's great. And I mean, I love the whole presentation and the direction that the School of Architecture is going.
I echo all those comments, particularly Kathleen's about Dr. Goodstein Murphy. It's always such a pleasure to hear her speak. And I had the honor of attending one of her classes while I was present at the School of Architecture as an employee back in the day. Very good to see Ernest and Reginald as well. And I could not be any prouder of this school and what you're doing in all aspects, but particularly the DEI issues. This is just fantastic, particularly the Native people statement at the beginning. Wow, what a national model for leadership this school is. Thank you all so much for your diligent work. So proud to be a small, very small part of what had happened in this school.
One thing that I've come to understand, besides the extraordinary character of Ethel Goodstein Murphy as a professor, but one thing that I have come to understand is the devotion as well as the commitment of the school's alumni across the departments and faculty, former faculty, and former staff, for that matter, retain, I think, a devotion and a belief in what the school is doing. We're very privileged, I say, to have a small school. And we still are a small school, no matter the growth that we're experiencing. And I think are advantaged by that smallness in the sense of the proximity we have to each other and the ways in which we can work effectively with each other. I've often said that it is truly the work that anyone does in design has to be motivated by a degree of passion, an emotional commitment, and that there is very much, I think, an aspect of love that motivates what we do. And certainly, I think in a school of our size, it is that love that motivates the work that we do together, the teaching, the work between staff, and so forth. Again, I say that just rhetorically for the moment, but I believe that that is resonated even in this gathering today. So thank you.
Thank you.
We may have to depart, some for meetings, some for seminars and classes, some for studios. Others may even need to return to their work table wherever that can be found. But I want to thank Kathleen and Ernest for their guidance and for joining us at the lead. Thank all who participated today: Ethel, Gabriel, Michelle, Allison, Ngozi, John. Thank you so much for giving your time just in the presentation. Mary and Ryan for helping us organize this. And again, our larger host, the Arkansas Alumni Association. Thanks very much.